from the right-wing populism to a more moderate climate. But yeah, of course, as I said, we are still in the mood of wait and see how far Biden will be more progressive as compared to Trump when he hold the power position. And the last but not least, it is very important from the perspective of Muslims throughout the world, where yes, Muslims throughout the world now are in the mode of wait and see to monitor how far Joseph Biden will act fairly towards Muslims in the US and abroad. And one of the promises, and if I may refer back to the promises made by Biden, first to terminate the Muslim ban on his first day in office, and this statement was followed by his vow on October 15th that Muslim Americans would be included in every social and political aspect in his administration. And it is undeniable that there is a high expectation from Muslims towards Biden, and this can be seen through the percentage. 69% of Muslims voted for Biden. Besides, there is also positive expectation from Muslims abroad, in which they wish to see how far Biden will amend or terminate, of course, for example, the deal of century and other foreign policies during Trump administration that are explicitly biased to Israel. And of course, as what was pointed out by Dr. Ermin, it is difficult to see any changes when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to the biased policy towards Israel. But at the end of the day, we still have to keep in check. And I think the role of the MPs or the representation of the Muslims, the newly elect representation from Muslims, they have to play their active role to keep in check, to ensure that Joe Biden will keep his promise, hold on to the principles of justice, to act fairly towards Muslims, either in America or abroad. It is hope, as my conclusion, all in all, based on, as I said, the character of Trump, plus his regressive policies, international citizens are interested. I think it is a fact. International citizens are interested in tweeting or posting something about Biden in social media. When they tweet or posting something about Biden, this not purely reflect their support for Biden, but more than desire to ask Trump out from the White House. So that 5 main reasons why Muslims around the world, especially including in Malaysia, we are keen to know, we are attracted to know about this recent US presidential election. So that's all from now. Thank you, Dr. Faridh.
Right, thank you to Brother Faisal upon his introduction on the topic given. Alhamdulillah, Brother Faisal already outlined certain important points which related to the how US elections 2020 is really important in the Muslim eyes, especially among the Malaysian Muslim here in Malaysia. So although there are some of the influence of media, social media platform, also the way how we perceive the election of Joe Biden's campaign in terms of he promised to uplift the ban towards the Muslim and others promises given by him, that makes some of the Malaysian Muslim here very attractive, and also keep an eye to see further about the foreign policy that will make by the Joe Biden and his team. So now, Alhamdulillah, we already have 2 questions here. Now our time's already 9:34. I think I will change slightly our the way how I conduct this forum. So here there are 2 questions towards Dr. Ermin. First questions here from Zainul and Sadia. I think I will go direct to the questions from the audience here. Could Dr. Ermin Sinanovic explain again with regard to Barack Obama comment on having a high domestic cost, for US politicians not showing clear support to Israel, or for showing support for Palestinian cause? What are the costs for not showing this clear support for Israel? And then second question also to Dr. Ermin, during Trump administration, the engagement and involvement of US in Asian affairs has been lukewarm compared to previous administration. How do you envisage Joe Biden's policy to Asia, which recently signed RCEP with other partners, including China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand? So I think, Dr. Ermin, you may respond to this question first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the questions. Thank you, Brother Faisal, for your remarks. I think we all learned a lot and they were really excellent. The first question, what are the costs? Well, the costs are, in the United States, you cannot, I think that's true in any country, but especially in the United States, you cannot get elected without a lot of money. To run a campaign, to run a successful campaign in a big country like the United States, you need a lot of money, which means you need many donors, you need donations and things like that. If somebody expresses support or even criticism, even mild criticism of Israel or support for the Palestinians, in a way that displeases the Israel lobby in the United States, and of course two leading political scientists, Stephen Walt and John Mearsheimer, had written a book almost 15 years ago on the Israel lobby and their power in American politics. That person risks losing that financial support. Not only that, but then the opponent will be heavily funded by pro-Israel lobby. When I say pro-Israel lobby, I do not mean only some Jewish groups that are active in American politics, like AIPAC, but I also mean here evangelical groups, Christian evangelicals, who are intent on supporting the state of Israel and many others. So those are the domestic costs. The domestic costs could lead to loss of a seat, whether in the Congress, Senate, state Congress, no matter where that seat is. And it could lead also to accusations of anti-Semitism. And that in the United States is a very big accusation. If someone is accused of anti-Semitism, then that person has to spend half of their time and energy defending themselves against that accusation, as opposed to trying to, to promote their own policies and agendas and ideas and so on. And so the cost is really high. It drains energy. It creates a perception that this person is intolerant, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. And for that reason, that leads to a loss of financial support, and it could also lead to a loss of support in terms of votes. A lot of people may decide not to vote for that candidate again. So there's a number of things that happens, but ultimately the sum total of all of this is that person is pretty much has a hard time to establish himself or herself in politics for that reason. So for that reason, a lot of people just avoid any criticism of Israel and avoid voicing out their support for Palestinians, which only perpetuates then the occupation and the abuses against the Palestinian people. So that's as much as I would want to say about that. The second one, it's been interesting to watch. The Trump administration, remember during the Obama administration when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, they were talking about this pivot to Asia, which really never fully materialized. And then the Trump administration had left itself in a very unsettled position toward China, especially in South China Sea, in relationship to ASEAN. Secretary of State and Minister of Defense had participated in Shangri-La dialogues. And a few years ago, they made a pretty good speech about that, but then there was no follow-up. Another thing that is really puzzling about U.S. policy in the Southeast Asian region and the whole that wider South China Sea region is that the United States during Trump administration did not have an ambassador in Singapore. There was chargé d'affaires, but there was no ambassador. And Singapore has always been strategically a very important country for the U.S. interest in the region. So not having an ambassador in Singapore was really puzzling and hard to explain. And then came at the end of all of that. So the United States has been trying to engage with the Quad in the region, perhaps trying to engage Japan, Australia, even India to bring into some sort of a counterbalance to China, but nothing really came out of that. And I think for a few years, ASEAN countries had adopted wait-and-see policy, where they didn't want to antagonize China on the one hand, but they didn't want to abandon historic ties relationship with the United States. What I think we are seeing with RCEP is that ASEAN countries are shifting toward China. Is that shift permanent? It remains to be seen. But if it becomes permanent, then Trump could be in the future called the president that lost Asia and Southeast Asia to China. We do not know if that shift is permanent, but I think that it's very concerning. I personally think that the rise of China is a very concerning thing. We see the Chinese domestic policies toward Uyghur Muslim minority. The Belt and Road Initiative is meant not so much to help the countries that are part of that, but basically to establish China's footprint in those countries. And China is working diligently and over time to do that. And so I'm watching this with concern, and I do not know if Biden has a policy that will dramatically shift these calculations that have been created during Trump presidency and in the last few months. And what is also symptomatic and what is also hard to understand is that the United States pretty much did not make any public statements on RCEP. It's being left out. It's almost like the U.S. foreign policy is an autopilot now, and that Trump is not focused on governing. He's just focused on his own theatrical appearances. Just a follow-up question to answer to Zainul and Sadia. How do we explain the rise of young Muslim politicians? I think there's been a generational shift in the United States, that the younger generation across the board, not just the Muslims, which I already indicated, that we have now these young Muslims elected to state legislations and so on, are not tied to the kind of interests and issues that the previous generation was. So it used to be given that the United States and its people in general are going to be unequivocal supporters of the State of Israel. With the younger generation, that's not the case. With the rise of social justice concerns, Black Lives Matter, many people are seeing how these struggles of the Black people in America and struggles of the Palestinians in the Middle East are connected. They are part of the same sort of dispossession of certain populations under the expansive regimes. And so for that reason, I think among the younger population, you are seeing much stronger support for social justice issue, including the Palestinian issue. And among such population, I think the accusations of anti-Semitism, the accusations that someone is against the State of Israel, do not carry as much weight as before. So in that sense, we are seeing a shift, but it's only happening in certain areas. It doesn't happen everywhere. It happens in areas where you have that kind of population that is a little bit more, for lack of a better word, cosmopolitan, a little bit more open-minded. So there are still many areas in the United States where an election of a Muslim would not be possible, I think. But there are now increasingly these kind of shifts. So are these shifts permanent? Again, remains to be seen, but it's definitely been. And for that reason, like I said, Trump presidency had created, paradoxically, space for these type of concerns that previously did not exist. Even under Obama, criticizing the State of Israel and that's what he refers to in his memoir, had been very difficult, right? But under Trump, in a way that Trump doubled down on support for Israel, more people in the United States started questioning that support. And I think that that sort of translated into these type of issues that we are seeing today.
Okay, thank you to Dr. Ermin upon his response to the questions posted by our audience here. So now I change to our brother Faisal for the second question from me, because of there is no question to you. So for my question in second part is related to the young generation or young Muslim politician in US, already as mentioned by brother Ermin. So maybe I would like to know about how this kind of Joe Biden presidency will affect Malaysian Muslim as a whole, and also why this kind of Muslim communities in US are really important to us in Malaysia, that we have to put forward, or we put our eye on them basically. So where this kind of Muslim community in US will lead Muslim community in Malaysia, especially in terms of maybe foreign policy or politics or democracy or equal treatment or justice, for example.
All right, thank you, Dr. Faridh. Before I answer that question, please allow me to give a quick comment on the issue of RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, that between China and several countries, signed on 10th of November 2020. All right, we can now presume that the new president-elect's priority is to tackle the pandemic and economic fallout. And given the current economic meltdown across the world, Biden's big agenda for economy and is to increase the tax to people earnings 400,000 a year and above, which represents the top 1.8% of taxpayers. So this plan indicates that a country such as the US, that is always referred as a giant in economy, still has to deal with the problem of revenues that they need to increase. And in relation to that, I do believe Biden will follow Barack Obama's legacy when Barack Obama drafted the TPP agreement. And as we know, the issue of RCEP, when the China has made a fast move following the cancellation or the termination of TPP previously, on which we discussed now about the RCEP, the agreement. So, of course, the RCEP will be the major step for the US government to find new way of economic partnership during the current economic stability. And I do believe that the new leadership of Biden will be more engaging and open to find common grounds with other countries, including Malaysia and Southeast Asia or ASEAN countries, in solving the current global economic turmoil. Okay, referring back to Dr. Farid's questions on why Muslims in US is perceived as important, from the eyes of the Muslim in Malaysia or around the world. I think we have to note that statistically, people go abroad. The statistic or the number of people who study abroad and remain or who desire to stay abroad is significantly high. If I may refer one book written by Zaiuddin Sadar, Jordi Sierra, and Scott Jordan, Muslim Societies in Post-Normal Times, it indicates the record which recorded many countries, Muslim countries, such as Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Nigeria, Malaysia, especially among the youth, they try to find education abroad, and they desire to remain in their in that country after graduation. And in this specific case is United States of America, US. So this phenomenon had a tremendous impact on the future of Muslim when it shifted the paradigm that previously regarded the Middle East or Southeast Asia or generally the global South at the center of Islam to a new direction of Islam that is global North. Again, I stand corrected if it is wrong, but it shifted the paradigm. So the issues of Muslims in Malaysia or Muslim around the world in general are now intertwined with the Muslims in the US, and both sides can relate more with one another. And the current controversial issues, for example, the Muslim Prayer Acts, Muslim Pro, for instance, it shows that how Muslims, we share, especially among the youth, we share the same facilities, we share the same updates, we subscribe the same tazkirah, the sermons, and so on. And this includes the role of Muslim YouTubers, Insta-famous, the bloggers, and other social media influencers who share their views and interests with the rest of the world and find the common values with their audience. So any progress or updates about Muslims in the US has certain impacts on Muslims in Malaysia. And we can see now trend. So this kind of trend, the new way of universal Islam, especially in terms of the way of Muslim youth look at certain issues with the perspective that are widened than and references which are based on the common universal values rather than the local context. So having pointed out the statistics just now, we can see the growth in terms of number among the Muslim youth to go abroad and to remain in the United States. And of course, now it is significantly high, even from the Muslim in Malaysia, especially in the urban area, to find like tazkirah or asatiza who are English-speaking background. They subscribe, as I said, YouTube, or they ask the questions through Instagram, through certain asatiza from the US. So they have now share something in common, and of course, as I said, as I pointed out just now, the issue of Muslims in US, in Malaysia, all around the world are now perceived as intertwined each other. So we have something more that can be related one another. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Faridh, may I add something to this?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ermin. You can add and then just include your final words, final remarks before we end our forum.
All right, so I'll do that. Together. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Brother Faisal that the U.S. Muslims are increasingly having a global role to play. The United States is a global superpower. Its culture is pervasive, as we know, from our children, from observing around, from all the major social media come from the United States. The language of the social media is English. Pop culture is primarily produced in the United States, with the exception of K-pop and some other things, but for the most part, it's the US. The movies that people watch are, again, disproportionately American movies. And so American culture through that has a tremendous impact all around the world. American Muslims being part of the United States are no different. So they become part of that global power of the United States. And I like what Brother Faisal highlighted, which is that American Muslims are increasingly now speaking not just to American Muslims, but they are speaking to Muslims globally. All around the world, people are listening to lectures of Omar Suleiman, of Hamza Yusuf, of many other American Muslim thinkers, leaders, preachers, for better or worse. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not always good, because the concerns that they may have may be different. I think this is a challenge for people who are in different countries to make themselves relevant, to speak the language that especially the younger people understand, The younger people do not want any longer the old ustaz type of lectures, where the ustaz opens the book and just reads from it and acts as if this is the truth and nothing else can be questioned, because people can go online and they can find different opinions. They can listen to other preachers and say, well, you may say this, but I heard that. So that old style preaching simply cannot do it in today's world. And we are continuing that to our own detriment if we continue it, you know. So we need to adopt a new languages. We know, of course, the famous saying of Sayyidina Ali ibn Talib radiallahu anhu, خاطب الناس على قدر عقولهم. Speak to people according to the level of their understanding, meaning use the language they understand. Do not try to use a language they don't understand. And the young people today speak a different language than I used to speak 20 years ago. And definitely people 30, 40, 50 years ago, you know, at the beginning of the Islamic revival in Malaysia in the 70s and the 80s, was a totally different discourse and different language. So I think we need to adapt to these changes, and we need to be able to present the message of Islam in a way that is understandable. And like Brother Faisal said, people are now interested in more kind of universal approach to Islam, not a very particular localist approach to Islam. Not everybody, but many, especially among the urban, educated population. They want something new, something different. They want to see Islam not simply as a set of rules and talk about halal and haram, but also about many different issues and how Islam touches on wider community concerns, issues of social justice, even issues of equality and so on. And I think this is very important to understand. My final remarks are that, yes, definitely, I would say overall, on balance, the election of Joe Biden is definitely better for American Muslims than the election of Donald Trump. Joe Biden is going to, as he promised the first day of his presidency, he's going to invalidate the Muslim ban. He's going to open up the borders of the United States a little bit more in line with the previous administrations. He's going to include American Muslims at every level of administration. He even went so far to say that he's going to have at least one Muslim member of his cabinet. That remains to be seen, but this obviously is very, very different than Donald Trump. In terms of foreign and global policy, like I said, and I still repeat that, we're not going to see major difference. We may see difference on some minor issues or select issues in certain parts of the world, but I don't see overall this is going to change. I think the United States, one thing we didn't mention, I want to mention now, the United States is still going to promote status quo, for instance, in the Middle East, which means support for authoritarian and dictatorial regimes for the most part. Is not going to stand for democracy and promote democracy especially in the Arab majority countries. There is no indication that is going to change. So on that score, I think we are to expect more continuity, and let's see, once we see the constitution, the setup of Biden's cabinet, we're going to know more on where the U.S. foreign policy is going to go. I thank you again all for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure talking to all of you and seeing many of you again, Brother Faridh, Ustaz Nur Manuti, many others, Brother Faisal, and many others. And inshallah, I hope to continue this conversation with you in future.
Alhamdulillah, thank you to Dr. Ermin on your concluding remarks and also your insightful points with regard to our next discussions. And before we end, also, I would like to invite Brother Faisal to give 2 or 3 minutes concluding remarks before we end our forum. Please.
Okay, thank you, Brother Faridh. Yeah, I think as what we have discussed, the conclusion is more or less similar to those times since my school days. People always say that U.S. presidential election, nothing produce any concrete or progressive action. But of course, at the end of the day, perhaps we as Muslims, we can give the benefit of the doubt to Biden to do some perhaps reform or change, and at least to fulfill his promise to be more progressive in terms of respecting the people of colors and also respecting Muslims and other vulnerable groups of people, including refugees. So, for your info, ABIM, we have issued our official statement on the day after the President-elect Joseph Biden was announced as the winner. And of course, our main point concerned on the foreign policies, as what was said just now. And also, we also touch on the issue of interfaith and inter-ethnic relations, where ABIM urged the new leadership of the US to terminate any policies that were oppressive towards the minorities, like Muslims, people of colors, and so on. And we do believe, even wherever we believe, during the period of Trump, even during the period of Biden, we as Muslims, we are part of the community of the world. At the end of the day, we are human beings. We, as people, we want to work together under the name of humanity to succeed in our own lives. And if you ask me whether I would like to congratulate Biden or not, as what was said in our official statement, it is certainly premature to conclude that Joe Biden is better than Trump, but at least perhaps from the tone of the presidential campaign, we shall reserve some, we shall reserve him the benefit of the doubt for now. So I hope for the best, for the better. And we, as Muslim in Malaysia, we always keep praying for the betterment of the Ummah, our brothers and sisters in the US. We hope to always keep in touch, and we hope to live happily. And of course, we should not undermine the potential of the Muslim in the US. As I said, it could be the trendsetter for Muslim youth from the global north, when we have the Yasser Qadi, Omar Sulaiman, and so on. And so thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Ermin, and our brothers and sisters from US and also from Malaysia.
Alhamdulillah.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you to Brother Faisal for his concluding remarks. Alhamdulillah, we came to an end for our global forum tonight. Alhamdulillah, I do hope to all participants who listen to the discussion got very the important and also insightful information regarding the future of Islam and Muslim community during the presidency of President-elect of Joe Biden. So, as mentioned by Ustaz Muhammad Nur Manuti earlier of our discussion, when he mentioned about the hadith from Prophet Muhammad, "Man la yahtamu bi amri muslimin falaysa minhum." So at the last of this discussion, I will put an end in terms of the future of Islam and the Muslim community is on our hand, is in our hand. In the US, Alhamdulillah, we can see there are changes in terms of the way how people, the community accept the Muslim new rights, especially the young generation. However, in the Muslim global world, in the Muslim world, in the Middle East and also in Malaysia, Indonesia, part of in our Southeast Asia region, the changes seems slightly quite slow to change. However, we cannot never put this kind of hope at top of our missions. So inshallah, I do believe that in the coming future 3 to 5 years, inshallah, the changes what was happened in the US also will give some of, as Brother Faisal mentioned, as a trendsetter to the global young Muslim to participate in politics in order to design the foreign policy that will uplift the issue of social justice, equality, right, and also the other thing that really to promote a betterment of one ummah or the betterment of the world, inshallah. So the last point from me, I would like to say thank you to Dr. Muhammad Nur Manuti and also to our panelists, Dr. Ermin Sinanovic from the CICW, and also Brother Faisal, President of ABIM, and also to all organizers. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you to all participants. Inshallah, we'll see you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.